Okay, welcome to learning about the Torah and Pentateuch and historical books that go with it. I'd like to introduce Rupert, who is just going to do a short segment. I'm going to just read out some information on our thoughts about animal sacrifice. So obviously we know in the Old Testament, back in the Torah, but God's people at the time had to sacrifice animals to atone for their sins. It wasn't always just for sins. There was other offerings to God that they gave because they wanted to. But the subject here is, we see all through the Torah that the sin and sacrifices of innocent animals to atone for forgiveness of sin, to kill and offer up the blood and bodies of the animals. Could you imagine what it was like? It would have been like blood, gore, smell, flies. This day and age, our idea of that kind of yuckiness would be pretty
horrendous.
Yes. So today, we're lucky because through Christ, thanking Him for what He did in redeeming us on the cross and giving Himself up for an all-time sacrifice, never have to sacrifice poor animals ever again. Thank you, Jesus. But back to the Torah. The descendants, but the obedience of God's people was obviously full of failure over and over. There would have been so much sacrificing going on. What was God's purpose? Was God to get His people to live sin-free so that they wouldn't have to kill their animals? Today's society would have a nightmare with all the animal activists. Where would we keep so many animals? And wow, what would our children think of the gore and their poor pets being slaughtered? Do you think that it was a way that God created to make sure that the people did not sin, so that we try our hardest now not to sin, but we are full of it, and would we be more obedient now to God if we still had to sacrifice the animals for wrongdoings? Would we be better people than what the ancient Near East people were? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's the tricky question. I mean, you ask any cattle farmer what the hardest part of his job is, and that would be to use the bolt gun on the sweet, innocent eyes of a cow. And that is to provide food. It's not for a sacrifice, it's just simply to do his job. Now, I think if we as humans, and if we were to commit sin and forced to slaughter animals as a repercussion for our sin, I think we would think long and hard about having to do that. It would certainly strike much closer to the human heart of who we are as beings, and to make a mistake and then to kill because of that mistake, I think it would cause a swift kick up the behind to keep us in line a fair bit more.
And do you think that's what God was trying to do back then? Because they were quite sinful and they just would do good in the eyes of the Lord, be faithful, obedient, and then just fall back in their ways.
In those times, God was dealing with a different type of people.
Yeah.
There were a few more heathens and a fair few more wrongdoers in those sort of times. But then if you think about the way things are these days, probably just about the same. I think the vegan activists would have a field day if that was what was to be done. But then again, they would be sinning just as much if you look at the news reports about them invading cattle farmers' properties to make a point and to take away their livelihood. We all sin. We're all aware of the things that we do that are wrong. But I think if we had that purposeful, right in your face repercussion, I think we would be far less willing to sacrifice sin in order to sacrifice living beings.
So do you just think like the moral compass of our being over thousands of years where God has taught us not to kill, the commandments not to hurt others, not to do these evil things, that we would have such a moral insecurity, I say, of wanting, or not wanting, but needing to kill things for our own wrongdoings, that we would just pull ourselves in line?
I think so. I think the deep impact of what it would be to sin and to have to perform
I have
to
trouble.
kill.
I have trouble cutting up a dead raw chicken. Its head's not there, but its body is. I can cut up chicken breasts because it's not in the shape of an animal, but I can't cut up a raw chicken with a knife. I just cannot morally do it.
Absolutely.
And if that animal was alive, I'd have no hope. I'd probably starve it, let alone be able to atone for my sin.
I mean, just consider this way. Look at a couple of baby goats running around in a field and imagine having to take one of them out because you made a mistake. Think about your pets. Think about your dog.
I cried when I run over a rabbit.
Even down to those endangered animals. I mean, we would have the amount of mistakes we make per day as individuals, all animals would be extinct in no time.
Yeah. There's a lot more of us now.
They're already struggling to exist. So I think it would really, really give us a good hard look at ourselves to realise, you know what, it's not worth it. I think I should really just live as God would have me live rather than...
Obedience. So what would you say to people that haven't read the Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible, the beginning of everything, of God's covenants, God's laws, promises, miracles? There's a lot of people in churches nowadays that also just start with the New Testament.
I think the only possible reference I can give to myself that might make sense to others, you can't listen to Led Zeppelin In Through the Outdoor or Coda without listening to 1, 2 and 3. You need to understand where it started and where it came from in order to comprehend where it ended up. You need to understand your history. We need to understand the reason we're here and where we came from. You can't have an opinion if you've not explored the purpose.
And even through all the death and destruction and atoning for sin and everything that we see in the Torah itself, we see so much of God's love and mercy. Like He perseveres with them for so long, and forever He's still persevering with us now. So it really proves how much God really, really loves us.
I think that's the essence of it all, really.
And you can't know God unless you've read these books.
No. And everyone claims to be an expert, but they haven't read it. So many of these so-called atheists claim to know that the Bible is pure fallacy, yet they wouldn't have opened a page. I think we need to get back to the basics. And just as I love my son, and I will do anything for him, he loves us and will do anything for us. We are children of God, and we owe it to our Father to be obedient and to give respect, but also to serve without question at times. There are those moments where you simply must do what Father says.
And do it with a smile.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Rupert. That concludes our interview on the first 5 books of the Torah and discussion about animal sacrifice.
You are most welcome.
We hope you enjoyed this discussion, and God bless you.
Good evening and good night.